Hello YouTube! Today in the Naughty Librarian I am going over my mid-October wrap-up. So far in October I have read 6 books. So far so good. A lot of them were really good, some of them were not so good, but none of them were terrible, so I'm counting it as a win. But yes, I read 6 books, they're all full of something spooky. I am super excited. Let's just get into it. First category is books featuring prophecies, and I read 3 of them. Oh my goodness gracious. I loved There Will Come a Darkness by Katy Poole. It is killing it, like hardcore killing it. There has been so many YA fantasies I've read this year that I'm like, oh, it's gonna be it, it's gonna be great, and then I read it and it's not it. It's been a year of failures. So when I picked up this one, I went in with reservations and I started reading, and immediately on page 1 I was like, oh, okay, so this is good. Yes. Yes, Katy Poole came through. Like, oh my goodness, so good. Basic gist of the story here is that in this land there were prophets at one point, and they left this prophecy before they all disappeared, and it was saying like, oh, the age of darkness is coming, because some shit's gonna happen, and then they just been left open for all this time, and they've been searching for the end of the prophecy, and now all the pieces are seeming to come together, and we are following 5 different characters and how their paths like intertwine, and they're all part of this like big ass prophecy. And all these 5 characters come from very different walks of life, so sometimes the story does get a little winding. That was like my one drawback of it, is that there's so many different perspectives, and a lot of the time these characters aren't actually in the same place as each other, so it's a lot of different storylines all happening at the same time, but they're all working towards the same goal. So sometimes it's like a little distracting because there's so many different things happening all at once, but all of the things that are happening all at once are really good. For example, I'm just going to say how this book starts, because this is page 1. I don't think anything that happens on page 1 of a book is a spoiler, because you could literally open it at any time and see what page 1 is. So, page 1 features a priest begging for his life from an assassin, but don't worry, he's one of those, like, diddler priests, so it doesn't end well for him. So that's how the book starts. Like, it just starts like, I'm going in, it's going to be heavy. And it just gets better and better and better from there. Oh, I love the world this is set in, and like the diverse peoples in here are very fascinating, and their cultures and their religious practices. It's very rich and lush, this world that she's created, and I loved it. Ugh. I don't really want to get into too many specifics of the plot, because I feel like anything could have been a spoiler. Besides page 1, because I'm not counting that. But anything else, it's like, there's so many little breadcrumbs and clues all throughout the story that I'm scared to say too much about it, because it's all a big mystery and it's full of puzzle pieces. But I will say, I thought this was incredibly well written. Loved it. It's definitely more of a new adult story, I'd say, or at least older YA. Like, I'm fine with it being in the YA section, but like, it's for older teens. I don't think this would be for a younger audience. I feel like it's definitely more of a crossover appeal. I'm an adult and I loved it. I thought it could also be in the adult section, frankly. It's really good. Without saying anything about the plot, I basically want to say this book is laying the foundation for the series. And hot damn, this is a solid foundation. Because it can only get more intricate and more complex and fascinating as the story progresses, because I want to see how this is gonna go. I'm really struggling with this review because I really think anything I say would be a spoiler, so I feel like this review doesn't make a lot of sense besides me just geeking out about how much I love this. The prose is very lyrical at times, and sometimes it's just very blunt and right to the point. And if you're gonna have a gory scene, she just gets right to the gore. She doesn't try to make it sound pretty. It's gonna be gritty. And then she lets the pretty scenes where there's like metaphysical drama, like be metaphysical and lyrical and stuff. So it's beautifully written. It's very interesting. The only downside is that there are a lot of perspectives that are not happening at the same time. The characters aren't always together. So that was the only real drawback I can find, but I mean, I gave it 4.75 stars. Like, I loved it. I took off a quarter star because of the multiple perspectives going in different directions all the time, but it was only worth taking off a quarter star. Like, it's really good. And I can't say anything about the plot because it's too spoilery, There's so many clues, but I love it. Who's my favorite character? I'll say that. I'm gonna say it's a tie between Ephra and Anton. I like both of them a lot. And I liked it when they hung out with each other. That's the only spoiler I'm gonna give. Those two characters do hang out with each other sometimes, and I want to see that, like, happen. It's kind of an odd couple situation, and I like it. But, yes, recommend with my whole heart. I loved this. It was so good. Another book that's just knocking it out of the park here is Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin. Oh my gosh, it's beautiful. I loved it. It was like 2 YA fantasies in a row that I loved. However, both of these YA fantasies are actually new adult books, so maybe that's why I loved them a lot, because it's pushing the YA genre, you know, stereotypes. Like, I'll just say that there is explicit sex in this. There is lots of swearing and violence, so I don't know. I would say this is definitely more of a new adult book, but whatever. That's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about some witches and stuff. Because that's what this book is about. It's about a witch and a witch hunter, and how are these crazy kids gonna work it out? Because whoops, they got forced to get married to each other. So there is a bit of odd couple-esque dynamics here, because you have a very foul-mouthed witch who is just like so shocking to all of the people she's around, because she gets married off to this witch hunter who is basically an order, like a holy order of witch hunters, and they're all a bunch of dudes who are basically like the squeaky cleanest Boy Scouts that ever existed, and she's in there singing like bawdy tavern songs, but to the tune of Big Titty Liddy. So they're all just horrified and beat red around her all the time. And I just loved seeing her make everyone uncomfortable. Like, frankly, I was living for it. Also, it takes place in France, so it has kind of a generic French vibe going on. Like, I didn't really think it particularly takes place in a real place, unless this wasn't a real place and I am misinformed. But I feel like it's just kind of generic France, you know what I mean? And I liked make-believe France. I mean, there's witches in this. Like, we don't need to have it be based in reality. This can just be make-believe France, and I loved it. It's, like, you know, like 1700s France. There's, like, the Holy Order, and then there's witches, and, like, all the people in between. And you kind of see, like, all of, like, you know, the gritty people. And then you get to see all the pious people, and like, people aren't always one thing. There's a lot of duality of characters in this. There are some like predictable, soapy kind of twists, I will say. You know, like those like, oh, gasp, it's so shocking twists. Like, you see it kind of coming, but you're like okay with it because it's so over dramatic that you're just like, yes, give it to me. At its core, yes, it is a story about witches and magic, but it's kind of also a love story. It's between Lou and Reed, which, by the way, kept throwing me off because, you know, Lou Reed is like a very famous musician, so I kept reading it as Lou Reed, and I'm like, I feel like she's a fan. But anyway, the girl is named Lou, the boy is named Reed. They are kind of forced into this marriage, and they're very much enemies, and then they kind of turn into lovers, and you know what? I rooted for them a lot. I wanted them to get together. I was very happy when they finally had that changeover from enemies to lovers, and I was like living for it. Loved it. If I have to be critical, I'm going to say that the overarching storyline here with like the prophecy of like, oh, if I do this, then witches will be safe forever. Like, it's very cliched, honestly. And then the villains are kind of caricatures. They're not really dynamic, interesting people where I feel like, ooh, I understand why they're doing this. They're just kind of there to be evil. So I will give it that. It's just, it's got so much other stuff that I loved that I was able to, I don't know, look over the things that I could have been critical about. So, like, now that I'm rethinking things, there are things to be critical about here, but when I was reading it, I absolutely loved it. I couldn't put it down. It was so much fun. So I do recommend. It is witches, and it's kind of sexy at points, and it's kind of, like, hilarious, and it's just, it's great. It's great humor, and I had a really fun time reading it. I also read The Girl the Sea Gave Back by Adrienne Young. And this was not on my TBR list, but I saw it on my shelf and I was like, ooh, you know what? I could go for a Viking story. I feel like the Viking, like, religion and their practices and their kind of cultural thing has this kind of like earthy wildness to it. And I was feeling that vibe a lot, and I was like, ooh, I feel like this is good for October. Like, I gave it 2.5 stars. Like, I'll be honest. It's not very good, but it's not terrible. I had read Adrienne Young's debut, which is Sky in the Deep. It's kind of, this is kind of a series. I feel like they're more like companion novels than direct sequels, but this one does happen after the events of the first book happened, but we're kind of following different characters. So, the first book, I thought it was a solid debut. Like, I felt like her writing was going to improve from there because it had a lot of beautiful things going for it, where it's very lyrical, and she gets this sense of like cold and earthiness and wild magic. Like, she's very able to evoke that in her writing, and I love that. It's just the problem was, like, nothing happened in this. Which is weird, because, like, a lot of things happened, but the way it was written, we didn't focus on any of the cool stuff that was happening. And it's kind of supposed to be, like, these two characters, Tova and Halvard, they're supposed to, like, get together, but they don't ever get together in the book. It's just kind of implied that maybe, so, I don't know. Maybe I was just expecting it to be more of a, like, a romance subplot like the first book was, so I was weird that it wasn't happening in here. Like, the two main characters just spend, like, the whole book away from each other, basically. So I'm like, what? Why are you throwing in any romance? Like, if they're not gonna be together at all, they've never talked to each other, why throw in any romance? It doesn't make any sense, but okay. And essentially, it's like a war story. Like, one clan is gonna pick a war with the other clan, and they gotta fight. And Tova is like a I don't know, she can see the future. She casts runes, she can tell the future. And everyone's trying to get her to tell the future. But, like, some people like her and some people don't like her. She's got this whole thing going on with her. And frankly, I wasn't that invested in it because it was boring. Then you have Halvard, who was in the first book. Halvard was in the first book as a little boy. Now he's, like, a grown-ass man. And I was, like, living for it because I'm like, ooh, give me more Halvard. I loved him when he was a little boy. He was so precocious. And now he's just, like, also kind of milquetoast and boring. I don't know what happened here. I feel like just a lot of the fun that could have been had in this book got sucked out of it. And I don't necessarily mean fun as in lighthearted. I mean fun as in dynamic, compelling adventure story. Because while this is technically an adventure story, it's not very adventurous. It's like things just kind of happen and then it ends. I feel like this is a book of middle. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have a very strong opening or ending. It just feels like all middles, like the middle part of a book, but you need a lot more in the beginning and a lot more at the end to make it an actual story. That is the best way to sum up my feelings about this. It feels like just like the middle part of the book. I feel like this needs to be expanded. It's pretty short. It's like a little over 300 pages. And yeah, it just needs expanding. It would have been better if there was more to the story, because the story we got it's very plain, kind of. Which is weird because it's about Vikings and battles and, like, paganism, and I don't know how it was boring. I did mention this earlier, but I will give this praise that she does have a way of writing that is very lyrical and winsome, and I enjoyed getting that sense of, like, cold, because this happens in, like, a cold climate, and I felt cold while I was reading it, you know what I mean? And I felt the environment along with the characters, I felt the magic, and she has a really lyrical writing style that can evoke those things on a page, so she has that going for her. It's just this story in particular, not a whole lot happens, and it was kind of a letdown, I would say, but it's not bad. It's not badly written, it's just kind of not exciting, so 2.5 stars. Next category is shitty parents, and I read 3 books featuring those. Let's start things off with a really good book, which was Kingdom of Souls by Rena Barron. I genuinely really enjoyed this. Oh my gosh. Like, it's in the shitty parent category because, like, the villain is the mom. That's, like, readily apparent from the beginning, so that's not a spoiler. And it's just like, ooh, she's a shitty mom. So yeah, let's just get that out of the way. She's a shitty mom and she's a villain. This is about Ara. She is a girl who is growing up among witch doctors. She very much wants to have magic come to her. She wants to grow into her magic so she could be a witch doctor and like follow in her family's footsteps. The problem is, magic just ain't coming to her. So there is a price that can be paid for magic, and I really liked this idea of their magic system where you could barter for magic, but you have to barter away years of your life, maybe parts of your body, like maybe if you want something little, maybe you just lose a tooth or something, you know? Magic has a steep cost if you're willing to pay for it. So it's kind of a dangerous magical world, and I really like the danger in their magic here. But it is kind of centered around West African mythology, West African traditions, so it's very lush and inviting. Like, I love the world that she created. It is so detailed and intricate and just lush. Like, every page, it felt so full. You know, like the setting is amazing. The problem with Kingdom of Souls that's holding it back a little bit is that it's really not structured well. Basically, there's too much book, which is weird to say. It's just that this should have been 2 books. I think it would have been better if it was 2 books and you did more with less material in each one, because I think you would have written 2 very compelling stories rather than this one, which is kind of exhausting, honestly. Like, I was exhausted when I was done reading it. It's a lot of book. And also, 2 completely different story arcs. Like, you have one story arc, and that finishes, and then you start a whole new story arc in the same book. And I'm like, no, that second story arc should have been book 2, because it would have been much more, like, juicy to really, I don't know, explore both of the story arcs more than we got to explore them in this book, because they're condensed. So structurally speaking, it's not as strong as it could have been if it was 2 books. But then again, you know, it is a stronger story overall. This is a much more fascinating tale. It's just lush feeling every page. The magic is dangerous. The world is creative. And I loved all of it. It's just, there's certain things, and she's a debut author, so I feel like they're like debut mistakes, where certain things were repetitive. Like Ara, for example, she keeps repeating the same mantra over and over again. If I had magic, then now everything would be different. Oh, why don't I have magic? Oh, if only I had magic. She repeats it like almost every time we go into her thought process. And it's like, bitch, we get it. And also, because I felt like there was so much shoved into one book that we never really got to know any of the tertiary characters. They're just kind of there, and they serve one purpose, and then you don't see them again until you need this prop to come back and serve its purpose. So there are like storytelling elements here that, you know, this is a debut, so perhaps, you know, these things aren't fine-tuned yet, but there were some things just in the structure of the story and how it was told that could have been better. Like, let's be real. That's why I gave it 4 stars instead of 5 stars, because it's just too much book. It should have been 2 books. I will stand by that. However, it's one hell of a book. Oh my gosh. I love this intensely. It is so good. Both story arcs are incredible. I wish I had more time in each one. So my biggest complaint is that I wanted more book. Like, I wanted this to be 2 books that are bigger. So as big as this book is, I wanted more book. It just should have been 2. But do I recommend this? Heck yeah, I recommend it. It's really good. It's like legit really good. Like, I recommend. Check it out. The next book I read was Wicked Fox by Kat Cho. And it also features a very shitty mom. I don't know what it was. Like, I read so many shitty mom books. I don't know what it was that was like manifesting shitty moms. This is based in Korean fantasy, so this is featuring Gumio, which is kind of like a 9-tailed fox creature person. They're like women who turn into foxes, and they also eat people. Demony, I guess. You don't have to eat people, but like they eat people. We're following in particular this girl named Mi Young and this boy named Ji Hoon, and they kind of meet accidentally during I don't know if it's a meet cute, but she literally saves him from being murdered, so cute, I don't know, but it happens, that's how they meet. And then they keep getting pulled into each other's lives, and there's all this like intrigue, and she's like a gomio, and people are trying to exploit that, or they're trying to kill her, or she's trying to kill other people, you know, it's very like K-drama almost. But like I love that about this book because I felt it was very culturally immersive. Like it feels very Korean, and it takes place in Seoul, so it does take place in Korea, and I feel like it's Korean, you know what I mean? There's a lot of Korean words in here, for example. There's, you know, besides just food, there's also just like their customs and how they do things is much different than how things happen in America. So I did feel like I was really being immersed in this culture and this mythology, so it was very immersive. It gets A+ points for that. But, let's be real, is this the best book I've read this year? No, it's not. It's not great, but it's not bad. So I gave this like 3.5 stars. It's definitely a solid book, and it's definitely very immersive, like I was saying, and it's got cool fantasy elements. You know, we got, you know, Gamio, so there's nine-tailed fox people eating other people. It's crazy. They got crazy stuff going on. So if you like mythology, you like K-dramas, and you don't mind lots of shitty moms, like, this is the book for you. Seriously, all of the moms in here are like shitty. I don't know what it was, but it was just like, why does everyone have shitty parents? Like, all these kids have shitty parents, like, consistently. I was like, who is raising these children? I don't understand. But maybe that's like the K-drama aspect of it. It's just like, this evil parents for some reason. But I enjoyed it. It's kind of a romance. It doesn't go too heavily into that. It's about other things. I feel like it's almost more of a friendship that's kind of becoming romantic. So there is like kind of a romance subplot, but it's not necessarily the main point of the story. So it's more of a subplot. And yeah, overall I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. It's not the best thing I've ever read because it's kind of just... It's not the most dynamically written, but it's very immersive, and I learned a lot about like Korean culture and mythology, so I had a good time reading this. It was fun. The last book I read so far this month was The Devouring Gray by Christine Lynn Herman. Again, real shitty moms. So many shitty moms. Like so many shitty moms. All of the moms in here are shitty too. I don't know what it was this month. This is about this town, and like I'm assuming like an upstate New York kind of town. And essentially there is this dimension that was created by these ancestors in town to bind this monster so it doesn't come into town and fuck shit up. They're like, no, you gotta stay in your little bubble we made. And now a long time has passed, and these people's descendants have inherited powers. These original people who made the dimension had powers, and that's how they were able to make it. So now their descendants have powers, and we're following these few kids who have powers, and their job is to keep the beast in its dimension, because if it gets out, it murders people really horrifically. Like, real horrifically. Like, it's gross. Like, it's gross. Alright, real talk for a minute here. Legitimately, I felt like I was watching a CW show while I was reading this. If you don't know what the CW is, because I do have some viewers who are in other countries, it's kind of a channel that is known for putting on, like, pulpy, soapy teen dramas. So it's like that, but like a particularly good one. Like, if this was a TV show, I would watch the shit out of it. Like, it would be so addictive because it's so juicy and melodramatic. Like, it's melodramatic. Like, it's not anywhere near reality, and you're just like, oh, like, this is ridiculous, but tell me more, popcorn, you know? It's like that. It's very eerie, it's very creepy. They have to keep fighting this monster, and it is like total teen soap opera, but a good one. It's very juicy, it's very dynamic, but like, if you're talking about, is it genuinely good though? Like, that is a very subjective answer, because if you happen to like pulpy teen dramas a la Riverdale, I would say, or Vampire Diaries, you're gonna freaking love this. Like, this will be your jam. If you can kind of take them or leave them, then you're gonna feel the same about the book. So overall, I think I gave this like 3.5 stars in the end, because I did enjoy it. Was it the best thing I read this year? No. But is it like a good pulpy, soapy teen drama? Yeah. And it has monsters and magical powers and shit, so it does have some like things going for it that are fun, but overall it's not the best, but like it's fun for what it is. All right, so that is the beginning of this month. I usually tend to read maybe a couple more books than I did, but I wanted to just really savor these, so I kind of slowed down a bit. And also a lot of these were very long, but anyway, I read 6 books. I am really enjoying them. I have noticed that literally all of the books I read featured shitty parents. I don't know if like that, I knew that was gonna happen when I picked these books for my TBR, but like they all have shitty parents. And it's like a weird thing I'm noticing now. Even the ones from the prophecies section, I didn't talk about the shitty parents in them, but literally so many shitty parents. So many shitty parents in all of the books. It is insane. Like, so bad. Oh my gosh. This murdery, horrible, abusive parents to all of them. All of the books. But anyway, let's move on. Let me know in a comment down below. Have you read any of these books? And if so, which one's your favorites? Which one's your least favorites? What's your favorite book you've read in October so far? Let me know in a comment down below. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like. And if you want to see more videos, make sure you subscribe. And I'll see you guys soon. Bye!